Hey, how are we doing? Let's talk about the four main platform roles or platform models that we're seeing evolving in the banking industry. Now, there is no doubt whatsoever that platform businesses are starting to take control and growing rapidly. And there's no surprise, it needs very little overhead. It is taking advantage of the network effect of the internet and the technologies underpinning it to enable digital businesses to grow very rapidly. And we've seen this with the likes of Uber, Airbnb, Amazon, and the list just goes on. But there's also a growth of platform dominance in the banking industry. We've seen this with PSD2 driving open banking and the growth of big tech and fintech companies taking a platform business model into the financial industry. So what is then happening? Now, I've been repeatedly known for making a fairly direct point of view. I strongly believe that the future of the banking industry will be dominated by platforms and platform businesses. I'm happy to be proven wrong, but from my perspective, I really think we're going to see this grow as a dominant business model going forwards, as we see a merge of banking industry with other industries, the adoption of embedded finance going forwards, etc., and those sort of things. Now, I've been working on a bit of research very recently with the IBM Academy of Technology and the IBM Industry Academy to look at the main models or roles that banks are taking in a platform economy and defining some maturity levels around that. So I thought I would spend this morning just talking about the four main groupings or roles that we have come up with based upon this research. And it's not our point of view, it's a combination of looking across the industry. So I'd be interested in your input here as well. If you are a thought leader or an expert around platform business models, particularly in the banking industry, then your insights and perspectives on this would be very relevant and interesting as well. And actually, the podcast that I co-host, FinTech Daydreaming, will be having its next episode, which comes out week on Friday, focused on embedded finance and looking at the platformification of the banking industry. So here are the four main roles, or can we almost say strategies, that I see being dominant in the banking industry. The first one is what we would call bank as a producer. And we're seeing this driven predominantly from PSD2 and open banking. This is where banks will make products, offerings and services available to third parties to embed into their platforms or apps or solutions. Embedded finance is an example of this. Banking as a service is coming out as a new dominant approach, which is also fitting into this category. Very often what tends to happen is the bank becomes a white labeled commodity provider to third parties. So very often you don't even know which bank you're operating with. You are interacting with an existing platform. You could to a certain degree see price comparison sites as an example. In the UK, very often mortgages are managed in this way, right? The next level from this is what we would call bank as a distributor. Now, this is operated as a two-sided platform where the banks would be working to pull a deep relationship in an ecosystem between third parties that it would make available to its client base. So to a certain degree, rather than being the bank white labeling its services and making them available to its users, the bank would be prominent and take advantage of fintechs and third parties to enrich its capabilities. Revolut is a great example in this space. as a good example. And Starling Bank is another one. But really, in the distributor model, the bank is the main channel to the clients, whereas in the producer model, the bank is sitting behind a third party. Netflix is another great example looking at a distributor model, right? Netflix owns the channel. You will subscribe to Netflix, but Netflix will take advantage of third parties to help to develop content and make content available. So they've got an ecosystem that will deliver through the distributor platform. The next level then is what we would call bank as a marketplace. This is very often a multi-sided platform where the banks will orchestrate a relationship between producers and consumers, almost like a matchmaker. So in the banking world, we've got SBI Yono as a good example for this, where through their super app, they are creating a ecosystem or a marketplace between producers of services and capabilities, retail stores, etc., and consumers that are interested in those. You could, if you were to step out of the banking world, you could almost look at this as a super mall or a shopping center, where in a mall you have someone who owns the infrastructure and makes it possible for small retailers to come in, set up shop, and then sell to consumers as they come past. So I suppose that's a good example. Outside of the banking industry, eBay is a great example for this, Airbnb, etc. The last area, which is in the fourth model, or in this model of 4, is what we would call bank as an ecosystem participant. And this is more of an emerging model around platformification, where you start looking at platforms of platforms, or a wider ecosystem of interconnected platforms. I've heard this also referred to as panoramic banking, where the bank will engage into an ecosystem that would span multiple different platforms and multiple ecosystems to tie together across industries, across relevant domains. Now this is still emerging. A good example in this space, although not banking, is Gaia X, which is a government-funded European operation. Have a look at that as a good example. But this is starting to emerge as a new platform play, which is not really banking specific, but where the banks will play a fundamental role in supporting the growth of ecosystems. So that's the 4 sort of models we have identified, and we will continue looking at maturity models within each of those. Some interesting results coming out of this. But I'd be interested in knowing, particularly if you are a thought leader or focused on the platformification of the banking industry, what are you seeing? What do you see as being the prominent models? And let me know. Let's have a good discussion around this. Otherwise, have a good week, and I'll talk to you again next week. See you later, guys.